make your day richer than it was before. Got some good times knocking upon your front door.
Welcome back, everybody. I am here with Kyle Jetsel, who I love that you use pretzel to tell people how to do your name, because it just like automatically to me brings like pretzels just seem like fun to me. So I love that correlation because it puts me in a good mood. Kyle, thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be here, Richard.
You have 6 children.
I do, yeah.
And you are awake and you have time to come on my show. How is that possible?
Yeah, not without a whole lot of work and a lot of pain and suffering, Richard, over the years.
That. Well, we can even talk about what happened before, what the subject was before we even went live today, but we won't. That's for the after show on the sound effects. But you have really with your what are the age ranges of your kids?
So my oldest now is 30. I've got 4 sons that are the top 4 sons, 30, 27, 25, and 22. And then we waited 6 years after that to have more kids. My wife suggested, I think I'm just supposed to be the mother of boys. But after 6 years, she reconsidered and we had twins. And so our twins are 1 boy, 1 girl, now 16 years old. So most of my kids are pretty well grown, you know. I guess 16-year-old daughter, that's a challenge, but you know, not like toddlers for sure.
Yeah. And what I love is that you have taken all of your trials, tribulations, wisdom, all the things you've learned and turned it into a way to help other parents. Because you said that you have strong-willed kids, which I think is a good way of explaining kids.
Yeah, you know, with 6 kids, you're going to have a variety of all kinds of different personalities, but almost without fail, every single one of them challenged us, pushed us to our limits, you know, made us wonder if we were actually, you know, good parents at one point or another. You know how kids can be. And I think that those challenges required us to create some pretty specific strategies in our home that allowed us to be happy as we face those challenges that those kids can bring along. So
can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and where you were like, okay, I need to figure out, this isn't just like everyday parenting, like I need support for this? Because I think in the I don't know, I'm not a parent, but in the parenting world, it feels for some reason kind of isolating, like everybody else's kids are good kids and yours are just so awful, when really all kids are kind of the same and they're just kids oftentimes.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think too often we present to the world, you know, the prototypical family, the white picket fence world, when in reality, you know, behind the scenes, there's all kinds of craziness going on. When my first 4 sons, my wife used to call them feral. That was her word that she would use and my wife was very feminine. My wife was the epitome of femininity and beauty and kindness and love. So when, you know, 4 little boys come along that are absolutely not that, challenge everything, defiance, you know, all the way. I mean, they tried everything to get their way, all the way to, in some cases, violence, right? And so, you know, we got to a point where I remember one morning at about 6:30 a.m., one of our kids woke us up screaming and yelling, right? And that's usually the start of a great day. Yeah. As you can
everyone's up. Yeah.
Everybody's up. And this son is more severe on the autism spectrum. So I have a son who's nonverbal, more severe on the autism spectrum. And, you know, a lot of times we call them meltdowns, but it's hard to distinguish between meltdowns and bad behavior because of autism, right? But, you know, those meltdowns can last anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. And this one lasted 4 hours.
Wow.
And I remember it pushed my wife and I to the edge of just, you know, it felt like our house was being bombed at the same time a hurricane was hitting, you know, under a flood, right?
Wow.
And the stress was so overwhelming. Finally, when we got him calmed down, my wife and I as sometimes we do, I think we're looking for someone to blame. And sometimes the easiest person to blame is the person right next to us. And I think it created this big giant argument between the two of us. And I remember my wife was, very feminine, quiet, calm, patient, loving, kind. I was the opposite, right? I was very masculine, grew up in a pretty tough situation. So my background was more aggressive, right? Those kind of things. And we started arguing, and I can remember the argument wasn't stopping. Typically, we would come to some resolution, but this one wasn't. I think it was kind of everything got to a head.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking out on the front porch with my keys in my pocket, just ready to leave. I said, this isn't the life I signed up for. There's so much turmoil in our home. There's so much discord. There's so much stress. I'm just going to get in my car and leave and never come back. And I remember in that moment, a memory of my dad popped into my mind. And it was when I was playing baseball as a little kid, in Little League. And in the game we were playing in, our team was ahead. And so they hit the ball to me and I made an error. And as often happens, the next few kids got on base and they scored and we lost, they won. And it was all my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to my dad and saying, I wish they wouldn't hit the ball to me because then we could have won. And my dad, in his infinite wisdom, right, kneeled down on my level and he said, that's not the way we do things, Kyle. You don't ever want to leave the success or failure of your life in anybody else's hands. You take responsibility. You work hard. You figure it out. You become the reason. He said, now, you're going to have failures in your life, but you're going to fail at things, but it doesn't mean you're a failure.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the learning process. And he said, don't ever give up if something is important to you. Don't you go down without the biggest fight you can give, right? And I remember that. And in that moment, I thought, I can't leave my family, right? I mean, this is kind of my world. And so I went under a pecan tree in our front yard right then and I prayed. And I remember feeling like God said to me, the problem is not your wife and it's not your kids, it's you.
Mm.
And it really, I didn't like feeling that way, but I realized I was the only one I could have changed. And so it was in that moment that I committed to saying, you know what? I'm never going to leave. I'm never going to give up. I'm going to die trying if necessary, but I'm going to figure some things out. And what ended up happening was it was me. I wasn't managing things in a way. I was using fear on my kids to control them. And she didn't have that in her arsenal, right? As a feminine, wonderful woman. And I said, I've got to learn from her and allow her to mold me into a better man so that I can learn how to manage these kids and work with them and understand who they really are, because I don't want to break their spirit.
Yeah.
Right. I want them to be strong. I want them to be confident. I don't want to break their spirit, but I do need to do a better job of aiming them in the right direction. Right. So that when they get out of my home, they can become what we all want our kids to be. Right. And so, it was in that moment that I made a decision to make that basically my mission as a father and a husband and to regain the trust of my wife. And so that's really where it all started for me. But that's been my mission ever since. And once we started organizing things and getting things in order and creating strategies as a couple, it brought us closer together and really repaired our family.
Yeah, because there are lots of books, but there are not. There's no handbook for parenting, and people, even if they're your kids, they all have personalities, and they're all going to be different, and managing all of that. But you have kind of put together at least some guidelines or some help for people who are trying to go through the parenting life. Can you talk about kind of some of what you've put together, some of what you help people do, and how you came to find these things?
A lot, like I said, as we started, a lot of it was through just failing in a lot of different ways, right? And realizing, a big part of what my wife and I did was we had never really sat down and looked at what we ultimately wanted our family to be in the long term, right? I remember we were reading to our kids one night. We finally got them calmed down, and we were reading Alice in Wonderland. You're probably familiar with even the story I'm going to tell. And it was when Alice was going down this hole and she comes to this crossroads and there's a cat there. And she says, which way should I go? And he says, well, it depends on where you want to end up. And she says, well, I don't really know where I want to end up. And he says, well, it doesn't matter. Then keep going. You'll end up somewhere. Right. And I'll never forget looking at my wife, and she looked at me, and we thought, we haven't even written out, or we haven't even discussed what we want our family to be, or how we want to teach these kids, or what we want to arm them with. And we started creating maps, and really that map, and not so much as the map on how to get there, but the map on where we wanted to end up. Right. And then alternately, we also wrote, what if we keep doing the same crap we're doing right now? Where will we likely end up? And I think both of those parts are important, because it's not enough to create a world that you want to have, right? You almost have to scare yourself into saying, I don't want this, right? Because you got to have something to run away from and something to run towards. And I think that in itself can be very powerful to parents, to sit down and say, what do I really want here for my kids and myself as a parent and as a spouse and as a couple? What do we ultimately want long term? And then that gives you, some sort of vision. And then it's a lot easier to start creating steps or strategies that help you achieve that vision. Too often, I think we get into default mode where we just start, cruising, and we're really not pointing in a direction. We're going to end up somewhere, like the cat says. Why don't we identify where we want to end up? And then that gives us some sort of guidelines in how we create our worlds and how we manage our situation.
Wow. I mean, so you have kind of this roadmap, right? Like you and your wife put together this roadmap of what you want to accomplish as parents and what you want your children to be. And then another curveball happens and you lose your wife. Can you and so that's not in your roadmap, right? Like it just like one more thing that you have to then figure out how to do. Can you talk about what that was like?
In October of 2021, my wife passed away suddenly, leaving me. I feel very, very blessed that she was with me for 30 years. We were married for 30 years at that point. And luckily we had created and built this foundation that I think was strong enough to withstand, this tragedy in our life. But certainly, just like I mentioned before, I'm not comfortable not having a plan, right? And so, and I think that's a big part of what is important for all of us to do, is be able to adjust, right? I mean, we're going to have curveballs thrown our way that we've really got to make adjustments in. And so, I personally realized that certainly it was a tragedy for me, but it was also a bigger tragedy for my kids.
Yeah.
And I needed to really focus on them for a period of time. And so, I mapped out, I wrote a map and started creating strategies and tactics that I knew would be helpful for them. And because I realized we're not above this tragedy destroying us. None of us are above anything attacking our happiness and our joy, right? And being able to weave its way in. And so, I consciously created a map for each of my kids and for myself, and I think a big part of it was just creating that map and then following through helped me and helped my kids to not just survive that tragedy, but actually thrive, which I know is what my wife would want, right? She wouldn't want us to fall apart and turn into this big mess of a dysfunctional. She built something, and she would want us to keep that, right? And so that really was what became my mission at that point, was to keep it going and make sure that as I saw things arise and as I saw challenges that I was faced with, is to face them head on, right? Like my dad said, don't you go down without the biggest fight you can. This is important stuff, right?
Yeah.
Don't you ever give up. Don't you go down without the biggest fight you can give. And so a lot of it was just sitting down, even though I was facing the same grief myself, and discouragement and overwhelm and pain and suffering. There's a time for me to do that, but really I needed to jump right into serving my kids at a higher level and making sure they knew that we could survive this together. And it's been through that process that I think has brought us closer. It's the reason my son can sit over there and make silly remarks, as we're getting started, because he knows what I'm going to be talking about, right? But he's got a big grin on his face because he's thriving. He's living his best life. He's happy, he's joyful, and he's spreading that in his own, disgusting way, whatever that may be.
We were talking about farts before. And there's still going to be, I'm assuming meltdowns and conflict and things, but is it the way you're dealing with them? Is it the communication? Like, is there something that you can kind of break it down into, like, what has really changed the dynamic of your home?
Well, I think, we have to understand as parents, I think way too often as parents, we think, well, if my kid will just do what I say, everything will be good.
Mhm.
Right. And I think that's just a bad thought process. Right. I mean, I truly believe, I should assume my kids are going to challenge me because they are. Too many parents go through life surprised when their kids talk back, or surprised when their kids stay out too late, or surprised, when their kids are defiant or don't clean their room. What the heck are you surprised about? You did it. Every
Yeah.
generation has done it.
Yeah.
Why are you so shocked? Right? Why are we so
I
shocked?
thought my kid would be different than
I'm
who
gonna be the
created
greatest
them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be the greatest parent ever, and my kid's going to be the greatest kid ever.
Mhm.
Good luck. That ain't what's
Yeah.
going to happen. Your kids are going to challenge you. They're going to test you. My wife used to say kids are like velociraptors, right? They're not bad. They're just testing the fences all the time, every day, and they'll never stop, right?
Yeah.
They're figuring out their world, and they're doing things that you think are bad behavior or they shouldn't do, but the reality is they're figuring it out,
Yeah.
right? I'm not surprised when my kids do things that I ask them not to do, or they don't make their bed, or whatever it is, that the challenge you're struggling with. So the fact that I'm not surprised and I have a plan in a lot of cases, and that plan includes attempting to, approach my kids in a spirit of love, and I always use that as the lead. And that's one of the most wonderful things my wife ever taught me is she said, when you have a challenge in front of you, if you can put yourself in a state of love and you address things in a loving manner, you won't be allowed to do things. You won't be screaming at your kids. You won't be angry and frustrated. You can't be angry and frustrated in a state of love, right?
Mhm.
And so when you approach it in that state, it changes you. And kids respond to discipline when they know the person disciplining them loves them. When you just discipline for the sake of discipline, it doesn't work. They're going to fight you every step of the way. And I think that's a big part of it is understanding, I'm the parent, they're the child, I'm the authority, but I also have to respect who they are and understand they're kids.
Yeah.
This is what they do, and it's okay. I've just got to help them guide that passion and that spirit and that strong will in the right direction so that when they leave me, they've got it right and they're ready to go. I tell my kids all the time, the reason I discipline you is because I love you. The world doesn't love you. If you don't learn discipline in our home and you go out in the world, you know what they'll do? They'll throw you in jail. They don't care.
Mhm. Mhm.
They don't give a crap. They'll throw you in jail and they will harshly punish you. I don't do that. I love you. The reason try to teach you discipline is so that you'll learn you can discipline yourself. So that when you get out in the world, you don't have to face those ultimately really harsh consequences, right? You'll know there are lines not to be crossed. You're willing to use your strong will in a good direction so that you can spread in love and happiness and joy wherever you go, right? In that state. So
Yeah. Can you tell everybody how you're also helping other families now?
yeah, so we have a program called The Secrets of Parenting Strong-Willed Kids. Right? And
Right from your own life. Yes.
right from my own life. And really it's parents already know a lot of this stuff, but we've really created it in a framework that's kind of a step-by-step walkthrough process, right? Too many parents, I think, read so many books and they say, if I can just find that one nugget that'll change everything, or they're always looking for the next tip that
Yeah.
works or the next. And our kids, by the way, remember they're velociraptors. If you change the way you do things, they're going to change too, right? They're crafty. They're figuring it out, right? They're not bad. They're kids.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And
Mhm.
so for us we try to teach parents, you got to really understand who your kids are first. I mean, let's talk about and get to know your kids individually. You got a parent. I got 6 kids. I parent them all different because they require that. They're different human beings, and the way they manage things and the way they think and the way they act is all different. So you got to know your kids, number one. Number two, we all as parents have a lot of baggage. None of us grew up perfect. We come into this thing jacked up, right? So it's a lot of times we've got to do a little work on ourselves to say, I've got to figure out how to manage myself better so that I can model the kind of behavior that my kids need. I had a mom one time, she was really upset at her child and she was screaming at me about her daughter. And she said, as she screamed, she said, if I can just teach her how to manage her emotions, we would be in so much better shape. And I said, hold on. You realize you're screaming at me.
Yeah. Let me grab my mirror quick. Yeah.
I said, you're not managing your emotions. You are screaming at me. I got nothing to do with this. You're telling her to manage her emotions and you're not in this moment. How can you, our Velociraptor kids, they will sniff out hypocrisy and they will use it against us. Again, not because they're bad, just because they're kids. They're figuring it out. I said, you got to learn to manage your emotions if you want, and model that for them if you expect them to be able to ever learn that, right? And so, then we go into talking about how to create your own strategies in your family. When you face a challenge, when you find yourself frustrated, angry, discouraged, upset, that's when you should step back and say, you know what? I've got a challenge on my hands. I need to write it out. I need to figure out what my long-term objective is. And I need to create a series of steps I'm going to follow the next time I face this so that I don't let my emotions be the driving factor, right? I need to have a series of steps I'm going to follow that are going to lead me to my long-term objective. And so when things get really crazy, you can stop and you can say, okay, what are the steps I'm going to take? And you can just take those steps in the spirit of love, right? And so we teach, as we go through this thing, learn your kids, learn yourself, learn how to create your own strategies. And then it's just a matter of applying those things and internalizing those things and realizing as a parent, you're always going to mess up. I have too many people that they'll work hard at something and they get good and then they mess up one time and then they give up, right? And I say, no, don't. That's just a hitch, right? And we have a strategy we call it 100% accountability and a whole lot of grace, right? And what that means is when you mess up, when you scream at your kids, you've been doing everything great for a week and then you lose composure and you scream at your kids. And then you go, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to guilt myself and I'm going to shame myself and I'll never get this. No, don't do that. What you do is say, I'm going to take accountability for my actions. I messed up. I'm not perfect. My kids don't expect perfection. And then you say, I'm going to take 100% accountability for this and I'm going to learn from it. But then I'm going to give myself so much grace that I'm going to hop right back on that train and start chugging again, right? And what it does is it starts to replace your old patterns with these new, better, more productive, more helpful, more kind and loving patterns. And again, kids respond to love, right? They respond to love. And so that's really, we just teach this framework, and the details of that can be individual for each parent and each child. But the framework is the framework, right? And it really seems to get great results for parents. So
it's like figuring out your business plan, right? Like starting a family is kind of like starting a business. And you got to figure out how you're gonna run it and be prepared as much as you can be. How can people connect with you and follow you and reach out to you?
Yeah, so you write in my name, kylejetsel.com. It'll take you to my website, and I actually have a copy of our map, our Strong-Willed Kids map. That it's not the original one we created. The original one we created is pretty messed up. Right. But we got to adjust. Right. But you can get a free copy of my map. I've got a tab on there called Free Stuff. Hop on there, grab a copy. I've also written a book about my wife after her passing. There's that on there. And I think there's another free item on there that you can download for free. My contact information is on there. I'd love to, any parent who feels overwhelmed or, feels like they just don't know what else to do or has read every book and is still struggling, this may be for you. And it's a great idea to just take a peek into it and see if we might be able to help you. So
good. And I would love to hear of the one parent who doesn't feel frustrated. I feel like they don't know what they're doing. Call in, because we'd also like to talk to you. If you're the one parent who thinks like, I got this, I have no problems.
Yeah. My oldest son recently turned 30, and he was telling me, I feel like an adult. And I said, you're not an adult. He said, what do you mean I'm not an adult? I said, until you have kids, you're just not an adult, right?
Mm,
You don't have to be an adult until you have kids, right? Then you have responsibility for another life,
yeah.
and it really dramatically changes the way things work. But you're right. The parent who doesn't feel frustrated or discouraged or overwhelmed or exhausted sometimes, I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, I'd like to
Yeah.
hear that too.
Well,
Make sure you
yes.
send me a link when you
Yeah,
talk
we'll
to
have a couple different screens on here for everybody to talk because I want to hear about them. Kyle Jetsel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I sure appreciate it. It's been
I
great
appreciate
talking
it.
to you.
Thank you. We'll put all of his links in the
Right.
notes and in the comments, and we'll be right back after this.
In this world of innovation, would you rather have an old, outdated flip phone or a brand new iPhone? A horse and buggy carriage or the newest luxury hybrid? A dial-up router with your AOL account or a super fast Wi-Fi hotspot? With nutrition, what you have been using or taking up until now hasn't been bad. There's just something newer. We all appreciate advancements in science and technology. In the same way we seek the best and newest in our electronics, vehicles, and everyday conveniences, wouldn't you also want the best technology and newest innovation for your nutrition and supplementation? At the time, you may have had the best from what was out there and available. Now, there is something better and newer, more bioavailable, more convenient, better tasting, faster acting. It literally is the equivalent to getting an IV full of high-tech nutrients right into your bloodstream, without the needle, without the appointment, without being attached to anything for a specific length of time. Simply pop these tasty, all-natural lozenges into your mouth and savor as they instantly start to absorb into your bloodstream through your mucous membranes. That's it. And with the added benefit of negative ions, in other words, energy, there isn't anything else out there on the market like it. Now is the time to switch to the next improvement and innovation in health and nutrition. It's time for advancement. It's time for better. It's time for APL Go and our rapid botanical DNA drops.
Welcome back, everybody. Happy August. It's my birthday month. It's also Madonna's birthday month. So maybe she'll come on for her birthday and chat with me. We've got a lot to talk about today. I have a pile of stuff, so we'll get through it. That commercial that you see at every show, the guy who introduced me, his name is Kevin, who introduced me to the products. His name is Kevin, and he's going to be on the show next week. So if you have any questions about the products, let me know or tune in live and comment and chat. They're really good products. I've been using them, and so that's why they're on the commercial. So if you have any questions about them, Tuesday is the day that Kevin will be here to talk all about them. What else do we have? My Ember mug, people. Apparently, I got the update this morning and it is still not working. So I contacted them and they made sure I had the right version. And so now they're back at square one. So now they don't know what to do. So instead, I have to use my Rosie Memorabilia moment, my Turk Tarzan mug that I got a long time ago. And so now I have to put my coffee in here. And I love it, but it doesn't stay as warm as an Ember mug. 136 degrees, perfection. When they figure this out, you should get this mug. I don't get any money from them, but you need this mug. It's an amazing mug when it works. I've never had really any problems until this fiasco. Okay, what else do I have to tell you? I just wanted to tell you that I don't know if you know this, but Waxaw has a magazine called Waxaw Magazine. And so if you're in the North Carolina Waxaw area, you should get this magazine. And it's available at lots of newsstands. They don't have newsstands anymore, but you know what I mean. Or get it shipped to your house. And they also have an online version. This is a very unclear photo because this is not, all right, well, the camera's not set up correctly. And it's a new magazine to the area. I think this is issue number 4 or 5. And I just love the magazine. That's all I wanted to say about that. Maybe I'll have more to say later. I'm not sure. Okay, so my dad, who lives in northern Wisconsin, which is where I'm from, has a giant garden in his yard. And one of the sweetest things and the nicest things that I think anybody has ever done for me is he boxes up stuff and sends them to me every year once his garden is growing. And so now for the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I will get random boxes of produce from him. And he spends a lot of money to send me these things. And so I thought it would be fun to open it here. The first box of the season is here, and I wanted to open it and just show you what my dad sends me. So I'm sorry for all the noise, unless you're one of those ASMR people. I literally have no idea what's in here. He just gets very excited and he tracks it. I think he like tracks it on, like he calls to track it and then tells me when it's delivered. All right, what do we have in this one? He sends this also to my other brothers. And it's always fun to see. Then we exchange photos to see who got more stuff. My favorite in the entire world, we've got a whole thing of basil here. This is basil, just so you know. This is basil. And we put this on everything. Love it. What else do we have in here? Lots of packaging. All right. Well, this zucchini, I think this is what that is. This is larger than my head. Do you see this? Larger than my head. Look at that. My dad's a really good farmer. And that's it. That's what's in here. Soon we'll be getting boxes and boxes of potatoes and peppers. You watch. It'll be very fun. But I love, and he said, I talked to him yesterday and he said, I haven't watched your show yet, but when winter comes, because he does a lot of like outdoor stuff in the summer, I'm going to sit and I'm going to binge it, and I'm going to put my computer next to me on the couch, and I'll just binge all of your episodes. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. So thanks, Dave. All right. What else do I have to tell you? If you want to be a guest on this here program, you can be if you're a good fit. If you think you're a good fit, email us at makeyourdayricher@gmail.com and come sit on the chair or be in the TV and chat with me and tell me all about the stuff you got going on. So makeyourdayricher@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, and who doesn't? Because a lot of people you'll see at the end have, and I appreciate every single one of you so much. From guests to fans of the show, go buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/makeyourdayricher and be part of the show. It's really fun, and I appreciate it. And I love you all for doing that. Okay, that's it. Tomorrow, Jeff Deskovic is here, who was falsely imprisoned for 16 years. And we're going to talk all about that 16 years of his life, what that was like, and what he has done, the work he has done to make sure people are either not being falsely imprisoned or getting out of prison when they have been. So it's going to be a really good show tomorrow. Sometimes we get real deep here, but that's part of making your day richer. So go make your day richer. Go make someone else's day richer. And I will see you tomorrow, Friday, all day. I love you all. Bye.